Hello, and welcome to another one of my nagging thoughts. I am almost through with my rebuttal to the 2-hour live stream that Vocab Malone did on the topic of complementarianism that was grounded in a book on Evangelical Feminism written by Grudem. I will put a link to both the original video and the book that it's based on with a free downloadable excerpt of chapter 1 so that you can check out both resources for yourselves and see if you think any of the arguments that I'm presenting have any merit. With that being said, I do want to just make a quick request and ask that you please do like, subscribe, share, and above all, please do comment. I very much enjoy hearing what you have to say, even if I 100% disagree. I am a firm believer that iron sharpens iron, and that when we give each other pushback, we actually make each other better, and it is an edifying thing for us, especially those of us who are in the Lord. Now, that being said, today's topic, I'm going to address the issue of the domination or the curse of woman, and then next week I'm going to wrap up talking about this appeal to the eternal subjugation of Jesus Christ within the Trinity, which is a crazy place to go in order to justify submitting, having women just categorically submit to mankind. But that is why it is complementarianism. Anyway, I'll get into that next week. Okay. What do I want to talk about today? So, we are talking about this argument that Vocab made. He said that the punishment shows the headship. And it says, after the fall, his rule will be forceful and harsh. And he's basing this on the original Hebrew word marshal, which is to mean forceful. And then he quickly starts pointing fingers at other religions, such as Islam, that do sanctify the idea of using physical force against a woman within marriage. And Christians like to pat themselves on the back to say, hey, if I'm not physically abusive, I am not dominating my wife in marriage. But I want to actually appeal to an example in the Quran and the logic of Muhammad to show that even though this man, Muhammad, in Sahih Bukhari, volume 7, number 715, he is saying that it's okay to hit a woman to the level where her skin has turned green. That's the level of comfort that Muhammad has in using corporal punishment with between a husband and a wife, or I should say from a husband to a wife. That's the level of physical dominance and beating that Muhammad is okay with. But if you actually look to his teachings in the Quran, Surah 4, Ayah 34, you're going to see that even though this brutal man understood that it doesn't require that level of physical force to dominate, especially a woman that you're married to. So I want to read that right now. This is the Quran, Surah 4, verse 34, Ayah 34. Men have authority over women because God has made the one superior to the other. And this is clearly in reference to the physical superiority that men have. They're generally 10 to 15% taller and bigger than women, and I don't think it takes a genius to recognize they typically have a lot more, particularly upper body strength. A lot of those differences have been neutralized by the modern world that we live in, that we all rely on power tools and technology, etc. But especially back in Muhammad's day, this physical advantage that men have over women is how he's grounding this. So I apologize for my digression here. Let me start this verse from the Quran again. He says, men have authority over women because God has made the one superior to the other, and because they spend their wealth to maintain them. So that's Muhammad's second point of logic that I also hear thrown around quite a bit in complementarian circles, is that it's a pay-to-play type of game in marriage, and as long as you're the breadwinner, you can't challenge that. That's the final authority. So strength and power. Anyway, I digress again. Let's start again. Surah 4, verse 34. Men have authority over women because God has made the one superior to the other and because they spend their wealth to maintain them. Good women are obedient. They guard their unseen parts because God has guarded them. As for those from whom you fear disobedience, admonish them, forsake them to beds apart, and beat them. Then, if they obey you, take no further action against them. Surely God is high and supreme. So I want you to notice the progressive discipline that Muhammad laid out in the Quran. You start with admonishing your wife. So you yell at her and you shame her, and that is usually enough to dominate your wife into submission. But if that doesn't work, the next step is not to physically flex your physical superiority over her. And it's not to deprive her financially. It's to flex your sexual independence over her. You set her to beds apart. And that is the best, probably one of the most effective ways to dominate, manipulate, control, and force your woman into submission, especially if she loves you. So I point this out because what I saw in Vocab in this live stream that he was doing is that he was being very self-congratulatory within the Christian community because even though there is physical abuse within the Christian community, and people like John Piper say that women should endure it for a night, and that the church can somehow fix this dynamic where somebody who says that they love you would actually physically harm you, which is just so perverse. Even though that does occur, at least we can recognize that it's wrong. But I just want to tell you, as a woman who was faithfully married to a man for 18 years who successfully deceived me, as well as years of professional and unlicensed Christian counselors, many people were involved, and nobody was able to get to the truth that my husband had set me to beds apart. Even though I felt like a concubine in marriage, I had nothing to substantiate that. And because of complementarian ideology, I couldn't challenge that. Or if I verbalized any of my feelings, it would be turned back on me that these are my feelings, they're unsubstantiated, and I have a mental problem. So I just didn't voice them because I had nothing to back it up. That's domination. I'm not even able to have my words taken seriously. So I really would love for Christians to understand that, and particularly complementarian Bible teachers to understand that when it comes to the domination of a wife in marriage, the gold standard should not be beating. That should be the last straw. Even Muhammad understood the lesser degrees of manipulation, control, and domination involve sexual manipulation and just simple shame and anger and admonishing. So that was the big point that I wanted to make there. This was the next argument that Vocab presented. He said that both man and woman in the fall, in the narrative in Genesis, they were punished within their sphere of accountability, sphere of authority, which this argument makes absolutely no sense to me, because if you look at Genesis 3:17, Adam was punished, or where he reaped the consequences of his decision to eat from the tree that he was commanded not to. The source of his punishment was in his relationship to the ground from which he came from. And even though God later, after he was done creating, granted authority to both man and woman to rule the earth, the source of Adam's punishment is not in his sphere of authority, so to speak, more so that it is from where he came from. And then if you carry this line of logic out, that each of the sexes were punished according to their sphere of authority, when you look at the woman, this argument really falls apart, because the woman was punished both directions. She was punished in her relationship to her husband, but also in her relationship to her children. So if that is supposed to be an indication of an alleged sphere of authority, that this logic would demand that the woman has authority over her husband and her children. And that is absolutely not the conclusion that the people who are presenting this argument would like you to come to. So because of that, I think they should absolutely abandon this whole line of logic that somehow the fall and the means of the curse are a punishment that reveals your sphere of authority. The next thing that, and the last point that I wanted to make today, is that Vocab said that Ephesians 5 is the antidote to Genesis 3:16. And I do agree with that. Before I get into that, though, I want to reiterate, Genesis 3:16 is the curse of woman, not of man. It's the woman that is dominated, not the man. The man's curse is in Genesis 3:17. The woman's curse is in Genesis 3:16. And I don't understand why men commandeer the curse of woman for themselves. If you're going to take the curse of woman for yourself, then you also need to take Ephesians 5 when it's speaking specifically to women for yourselves as men. And when it says submit as unto the Lord, then you need to submit as unto the Lord. And you need to be consistent in the way that you're approaching the scriptures. So I would agree that Ephesians 5 is the antidote to Genesis 3:16, which is the curse of woman. But the reason why I believe that is because of Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 through 28. And I'm just going to read that in the New English translation for you right now. And this is what it says. But Jesus called them and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in high positions use their authority over them. It must not be this way among you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." And I want to point out that the word for slave in this passage is the word doulos. And here's what a one-word study says about this word, which really is like probably the worst form of slavery that you could have, because it's lifelong. And here's what it says. It's somebody who belongs to another without any ownership rights of their own. This word study does go on to say, though, that this word, ironically, is used with the highest dignity in the New Testament, namely of believers who willingly live under Christ's authority as his devoted followers. So the important fact here in this doulos is that you don't have any ownership rights. So when we're approaching Ephesians 5 and we're talking about headship and authority, you don't have any ownership rights over the sphere of authority that you are governing and that you are being a servant leader over. And that's why it's an antidote, not because there's a chain of command and that a woman has to do a tour of duty in marriage, which is very much what it ended up being for me. But it's a willing serving, giving of one another. Now, next week, I'm going to dive into this heresy of the eternal subordination of Jesus Christ and why that's relevant to this battle of the sexes, and that we would actually toy with the internal workings of the Trinity itself in order to justify women being subjugated to men by God's design. So I hope you'll join me next week for that. I very much appreciate your time. Again, please do let me know what you like, what you don't like. And I very much want to hear what your arguments are, because I really am trying to grow in love and in knowledge here. And I do hope that all this information is helpful to all of you, especially those of you who are married. I hope this helps you genuinely treat each other with real love and real respect, and really in a way where you are focused on how to glorify Christ and not how to grasp at authority over one another and just seek your own in what you can get out of the people around you. Because Christ said the whole summation of his law is to love him and love others. That's our XY axis, and I hope that the thoughts that I'm sharing with you help you do that. So that's my goal. So please do share your thoughts with me. I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great week. God bless.